expert opinion is divided. I'll just give you one example,
Sure.
one of many. In the United States, Dr. David Ley, who works as a psychologist, has been doing that for more than a decade. He says there is no evidence that sex addiction is a valid psychiatric disorder. It isn't like drug or alcohol addiction, as you say. You don't get cravings and withdrawal symptoms. People who have lots of sex, it's more of a compulsion or an obsession. So addiction's the wrong word.
I mean, again, once upon a time, people said the world was flat. I mean, you know, a lot of people believed it. In fact, the majority of people believed it. It's one of those things where there's a stigma attached to it, and the stigma is sex.
You talked to lots of people when you did your research for this film, people who would describe themselves as sex addicts, and I wouldn't want to in any way suggest that their opinions of themselves are in any way not valid, but just citing what the experts say. Well, that, you know, are you convinced that it does exist in the light of your conversations with them? People
weren't diagnosing themselves with sex addiction. People were you know, there's been experts in the field, obviously, who have looked into this just as much as this other expert has sort of done, and come to the conclusion that there is a thing called sex addiction, similar to a thing where people have an unhealthy relationship with food. But of course, one can, you know, take out, for example, as another addiction, you could take out alcohol, you could take out drug addiction in one's life, but you have to negotiate with sex, and that's why it's a problem.
Okay, I'm not going to labour this too much, but I must just tell you what, for example, this rock musician, he used to play for the band Skid Row, Phil Varone, American, he reckons he slept with more than 3,000 women. And he says, I never considered myself a sex addict because sex never messed up the rest of my life or my ability to function at a high level. And the point I want to make you here is that you can't absolve men, because it is mostly men who pronounce themselves as sex addicts. There are some women, it's mostly men. But you can't absolve men of responsibility for their own actions when they have sex with lots of women.
No, you cannot. But of course, there's a difference of being promiscuous and having an addiction. You know, there is a difference, would you believe?
But a man who's had sex with more than 3,000 women, wouldn't that?
I don't know what the average the number of, you know, again, you know, it could be more even, you know. But you know, an addiction is a situation where it's similar to drug and alcohol, where the actual craving for the thing is ruining someone's life. An addiction is when everything else becomes secondary, and therefore the compulsion is ruling one's life, and that's what happens. And in fact, it has destroyed lives.
And that's the message in your film show.
It's a serious matter, because one could laugh about this rock musician with 3,000 women and all this kind of stuff. Of course, it's titillating and laughable, but there is a serious point to the matter. People's lives are being ruined.